The year was 2347. Far beyond the edge of known space, a single red light blinked on a dead console. It had been blinking for 300 years. No one came. No one answered. Until today. Captain Elena Voss stood on the bridge of the ISV Meridian, watching the strange signal repeat itself on her screen. It was old. Very old. The kind of signal humans had not used in centuries. But it was still calling out, again and again, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. "Captain, that signal is not human," said Lieutenant Marcus Reyes, her second in command. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. "It matches old council frequencies. The ones from before the silence." Elena felt her stomach tighten. The council. Even hearing the word brought back old pain. It was the council that had judged humanity long ago and found them unworthy. It was the council that had closed every door, cut every trade route, and left Earth alone in the dark corner of the galaxy. Humanity had been abandoned like a broken toy, tossed aside because they were too young, too violent, too dangerous to be trusted with the stars. That was 200 years ago. Humanity had not forgotten. "Play it," Elena said quietly. The bridge crew went silent. The signal crackled to life. It was not words. It was static, broken sound, and underneath it, almost too quiet to hear, something that sounded like breathing. Slow, weak, struggling. "That's not a machine," whispered Reyes. "Captain, something is alive out there." Elena stared at the screen. Her mind raced back to the stories she had read as a child, stories of the Great Alliance, the shining civilizations that ruled the stars while humans were still fighting wars on their own small planet. The Alliance had thousands of ships, thousands of worlds, and thousands of years of history, and they had looked down at Earth and said, "Not yet. Maybe never." Now, after 2 centuries of silence, one of their signals was calling for help. "Set a course," Elena said. "Full speed." "Captain," said her science officer, Dr. Amara Chen, stepping forward. "With respect, why? They left us. They didn't just ignore us. They voted to isolate us. Half our ancestors died fighting wars alone because no one would even trade us basic medicine. Why should we save them now?" The bridge fell quiet. It was a fair question. Every human in that room had grown up hearing about the isolation, the century when Earth was cut off from every star lane, every trade deal, every scrap of alien technology. Humanity had been forced to grow up fast and grow up alone. They built their own ships. They cured their own diseases. They fought their own wars, and they won them, without help from anyone in the stars. Elena looked around the bridge at the faces of her crew. Then she looked back at the small red light on the screen, still blinking, still calling. "Because we're not them," she said finally. "We don't leave people to die in the dark. Not even the ones who left us there first." No one argued after that. The jump to hyperspace took 6 hours. Elena used the time to read the old files, the last known records of the species called the Threnai, one of the founding members of the Council. Once, the Threnai were among the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Tall, silver-skinned, with eyes like liquid gold, they had built cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants and ships that could fold space like paper. It was the Threnai who had led the vote 200 years ago to seal Earth away from galactic society. Elena's own grandmother had told her the story 100 times, how the Threnai ambassadors stood before the council and called humanity a wildfire waiting to spread. How they said humans were too quick to fight, too quick to build weapons, too quick to grow. They were not wrong, Elena thought. But they were not right either. Humanity had grown, yes, but not into the monster the council feared. They grew into something else, something stubborn, something patient, something that never, ever gave up. "Captain, we're dropping out of hyperspace," said the helm officer. Elena stood up straight. "Bring us in slow. Full sensors." The Meridian slid out of hyperspace into open black space, and every person on the bridge froze. Before them floated the wreck of a massive ship. It was easily 10 times the size of the Meridian. Its silver hull, once beautiful, was now cracked and blackened, like a fruit left too long in the sun. Whole sections had been torn away, floating nearby in silent pieces. No lights, no power, just an old, dying signal, still blinking from somewhere deep inside. "That's a Threnai command cruiser," Dr. Chen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Class Vor something. I've only seen these in old council records. This ship is ancient. It shouldn't even still exist." "Life signs?" Elena asked. The sensor officer worked quickly, fingers moving fast over the console. Then he stopped. "Captain, I'm reading survivors. A lot of them. But their vitals are—" He paused, unsure how to say it. "They're fading. Fast." Elena's jaw tightened. "How many?" 312, he said. "Maybe less by the time we get there." For a moment, no one spoke. 300 lives. 300 lives from a species that once looked down on humanity like insects. 300 lives from the very people who had voted to leave Earth to rot in silence. "Prep a boarding team," Elena said. "Medical, engineering, security. We're going in." Reyes turned to her, his face full of doubt. "Captain, we don't know what's waiting on that ship. It could be a trap. It could be pirates. It could be 300 people who are about to die," Elena said, cutting him off. Her voice was calm, but firm. "We're not leaving them out here. Not like they left us." The boarding shuttle crossed the empty space between the two ships in silence. Elena sat near the front, watching the broken Threnai cruiser grow larger through the small window. Up close, the damage was even worse than it looked from a distance. Long black scars ran across the hull like claw marks from some enormous beast. Whole decks had been opened to space, frozen and silent. "This wasn't an accident," said Reyes, studying the damage on his scanner. "This ship was attacked, and not just once. Look at the pattern. Multiple hits from multiple angles. Whatever did this, it wanted them destroyed completely." "Then why are there still survivors?" Elena asked. Reyes had no answer. The shuttle docked at one of the few working airlocks. The team moved quickly, weapons ready, lights cutting through the darkness of the dead ship's halls. The air inside was thin and cold. Frost covered the walls like a layer of frozen breath, and everywhere the silence, heavy, deep, and wrong. "Captain, over here," called one of the medics. Elena turned a corner and stopped. In front of her, huddled together in a small side room, were the survivors. Threnai, tall, silver-skinned beings, but not shining and proud like the stories described. These were thin, weak, wrapped in torn fabric, shivering in the cold. Their golden eyes, once said to glow with wisdom, were dull and tired. One of them, an older Threnai with cracks running across his silver skin like broken glass, lifted his head slowly. He looked at Elena, at her uniform, at the small flag stitched onto her shoulder. His eyes widened. "Human," he whispered in halting Galactic standard. "You came?" Elena knelt down beside him. "We heard your signal," she said gently. "We're here to help." The old Threnai let out a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. It was hard to tell. "We left you," he said. "We left your people to die alone, and still." "You came." Elena did not answer right away. She looked around the room at the frightened, dying survivors, children among them, small silver-skinned figures clinging to what was left of their families. Whatever had attacked this ship had not cared who lived or died. It had come to destroy. "What happened here?" Elena asked quietly. "Who did this to you?" The old Threnai's eyes filled with something Elena had never expected to see in a member of the once mighty council. "Fear. They are called the Skarn," he said, his voice shaking. "They came from beyond the outer rim. No one has ever fought them and lived. No one has ever even seen them and lived except us. And soon we will not live either." A cold silence fell across the room. "The council is gone," the old Threnai continued. "Not weakened, not scattered. Gone. World after world, fleet after fleet. Wiped away in less than 5 years. We were the last ones running. We thought if we could just reach somewhere safe." His voice broke. He looked up at Elena, gold eyes shining with tears. "We had no one left to call." he whispered. No one but the ones we left behind. Elena felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy stone. The council, the great and mighty council that once ruled 1,000 worlds, had fallen. Something out there, something called the Scarn, had done what no war, no disaster, no plague had ever done. They had ended a galaxy-spanning civilization in less than 5 years. And now the survivors of that fallen empire were kneeling in front of the very species they had once cast aside, begging for the only kind of help left in the galaxy: human help. How long? Elena asked slowly. Until they find you here. The old Threnai's eyes drifted toward the cracked window, toward the endless black of space beyond. Somewhere out there, in the dark, something was still hunting. Not long, he said. They always find us. They always... The ship shuddered. Alarms Elena did not recognize began to wail through the broken halls. Red light spilled across the frozen walls. The old Threnai's face went pale. They're here, he said, his voice barely a breath. They found us. Elena's comm crackled to life. It was the Meridian. Captain! Reyes's voice was sharp with alarm. Multiple contacts just dropped out of hyperspace. Massive ships, energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Captain, I don't think we're ready for this. Elena looked around the small, frozen room, at the dying survivors, at the children clinging to their parents, at the old Threnai, shaking, waiting for the death that had chased him across the stars. 300 years ago, the Council looked at humanity and decided they were not worthy of help. Now humanity had a choice to make. Elena stood up slowly, her hand tightening around her weapon, her eyes locked on the flashing red alarms. Get everyone to the shuttle, she said, her voice steady despite the storm rising inside her chest. We are not leaving anyone behind. Outside, in the endless black of space, 3 massive shadows began to move, closer and closer still. The hunt had found them, and humanity would not run. The alarms kept screaming through the broken halls of the Threnai cruiser. Red light flashed across frozen walls, painting the frightened faces of the survivors in shades of blood and shadow. Elena Voss did not waste time thinking about fear. She had learned long ago that fear was a luxury for later, after the danger had passed. Move, everyone to the shuttle now, she shouted. Her boarding team snapped into motion. Medics lifted the weakest survivors onto stretchers. Security formed a line, weapons ready, watching every dark corner of the ship. The old Threnai, the one who had spoken to Elena, tried to stand on his own, but his legs shook too badly. A young medic named Sarah caught him before he fell. I have you, she said softly. Just hold on. The old Threnai looked at her with wide golden eyes, as if he could not believe a human hand was the one keeping him from falling. Elena's comm crackled again. Reyes's voice was tight with tension. Captain, those ships are closing fast. Their energy signatures are massive, bigger than anything in Council records. If they're the Scarn, we are badly outgunned. Understood, Elena said, keeping her voice calm even though her heart pounded hard. Prep the Meridian for a fast jump. We get everyone aboard and we run. No fighting unless we have to. Copy that, Captain. Hurry! The group moved through the broken corridors as fast as the survivors could manage. Frost crackled beneath their boots. Sparks fell from broken wiring above. Twice, the entire ship shuddered, throwing people against the walls, each time followed by a deep, groaning sound like the ship itself was crying out in pain. What's causing that? Elena asked, helping a young Threnai girl over a fallen beam. Structural stress, said her engineer, Corporal Diaz, scanning the walls with his handheld device. This ship is barely holding together. If we're not out of here soon, it won't matter if the Scarn catch us. The ship will fall apart on its own. They reached the airlock just as another tremor rocked the corridor. The shuttle waited beyond, its ramp down, engines already humming. One by one, the survivors were carried and guided aboard. Elena counted them silently in her head. Fewer than 300 now. Some had not survived the wait for rescue. The old Threnai leader was the last to be helped inside. He paused at the ramp and turned back, looking at the dying ship that had been his home for longer than Elena could imagine. "Sir, we need to go," Elena said gently. "I know," he whispered. "I only wanted to remember it, before it's gone." Elena understood that feeling more than he knew. She placed a hand briefly on his shoulder. "Come on, let's get you somewhere safe." They boarded the shuttle, and the doors sealed shut with a hiss. Through the small window, Elena watched the broken Threnai cruiser shrink behind them as the shuttle raced toward the meridian, and beyond it, growing larger every second, were three massive shapes cutting through the black of space, dark, sharp, and terrifyingly fast. "Those are the Skarn ships," the old Threnai said quietly, standing beside Elena now, his voice trembling. "I have seen them before. I did not think I would see them again and still be alive to speak of it." Elena studied the ships through the window. They were unlike anything she had ever seen, not smooth and elegant like Threnai design, not blocky and practical like human ships. These were jagged, almost organic in shape, like something grown rather than built. Black hulls absorbed the starlight around them, making the ships look like moving holes in space. "What do they want?" Elena asked. The old Threnai's eyes were haunted. "Everything," he said simply. "They do not conquer. They do not rule. They erase." The shuttle docked with the meridian just as the first warning shots streaked past, bright red beams slicing through space far too close for comfort. The moment the airlock sealed, Elena was already running for the bridge. "Status," she called out, dropping into her captain's chair. "Skarn ships closing at high speed," Reyes reported, sweat on his brow. "They'll be in weapons range in 90 seconds. "Charge the jump drive," Elena ordered. "Get us out of here." "Captain, the jump drive needs 3 minutes to charge," said the helm officer. "We don't have 3 minutes." Elena's mind raced. 3 minutes. 90 seconds until weapons range. The math did not work in their favor. She looked at the tactical display, watching the 3 Skarn ships grow closer, their strange shapes sending a chill down her spine even through a screen. "Options," she said sharply. "We could try to outrun them on impulse power," Reyes suggested. "But their ships are faster than us if the sensor readings are right." "We could fight," said the weapons officer, though his voice lacked confidence. "But Captain, our weapons are built for pirates and small threats. Nothing like this." Elena's eyes moved to the survivors section of the ship, where 300 frightened Threnai, men, women, children, were now huddled inside the meridian, trusting humanity with their lives. She thought of the old leader's words. They do not conquer. They do not rule. They erase. She would not let that happen. Not on her ship. Not to people who had finally, desperately asked humanity for help. "Reyes, redirect all non-essential power to the engines," Elena ordered. "Push everything we have into the jump drive. I don't care if the lights go out, get us that 3 minutes." "Captain, that means shields will be weak, maybe non-existent," Reyes warned. "Then we'd better make sure they don't hit us," Elena said grimly. She turned to the helm officer. "Evasive maneuvers, best you've got. Keep us moving, keep us unpredictable, buy us time." The helm officer nodded, hands flying over the controls. The meridian lurched sharply as it broke away from its position, weaving through open space in a pattern designed to make it a harder target. Behind them, the 3 black ships adjusted course, closing the distance with terrifying speed. 20 seconds to weapons range," called the tactical officer. Elena gripped the arms of her chair. "Steady." The first shot came without warning. Not a beam like human weapons fired, but something else entirely. A dark pulse, almost invisible against the black of space, that struck the edge of the Meridian's hull with a force that shook the entire ship. "Direct hit. Outer hull breach on deck 7, someone shouted. "Seal it off," Elena ordered. "Casualties?" "None reported yet, Captain, but that section is empty." Another pulse struck, closer this time. The lights on the bridge flickered. Sparks burst from a console nearby. "Jump drive at 60%, Reyes called out. 1 minute 40 seconds remaining." "They're gaining," the tactical officer shouted. Captain, they'll be in optimal range in 30 seconds. Elena's mind worked fast. 30 seconds until the enemy could hit them cleanly. 1 minute 40 until they could escape. The numbers did not add up. Someone was not going to make it out of this unless something changed. Divert emergency power from life support to shields, Elena ordered, just enough to hold them off a little longer. Captain, that will drop oxygen levels across the ship. For how long? We can survive 10 minutes without serious effect. Maybe 15. Do it, Elena said. We only need 3. The lights dimmed further as power shifted through the ship. A weak shimmer of energy formed around the Meridian's hull. Not strong, but something. The next pulse from the Skarn ship struck the shield instead of the hull, and though the ship shook violently, it held. Shields at 40% after that hit, Reyes reported, voice tight. They'll break through in 2 more hits, the tactical officer warned. Elena's eyes moved to the timer for the jump drive. 1 minute 10 seconds. Just a little longer, she whispered to herself. Another pulse struck. The ship groaned under the impact. Somewhere below, Elena heard the distant sound of alarms and shouting. Crew members fighting to keep the ship together deck by deck, wire by wire. Shields at 20%. 50 seconds on the jump drive. Elena's hands were steady, even as her heart pounded in her chest. She thought of the old Threnai leader's words. They always find us, they always... Not this time, she thought. Not today. Come on, she whispered. Another pulse. The shield flared and cracked. Sparks rained down across the bridge. Someone cried out in pain nearby, but there was no time to check. Shields failing. 1 more hit and we're exposed. 30 seconds. The third Skarn ship broke formation, moving to flank the Meridian from the side, cutting off any chance of evasive movement. Elena watched the tactical display, watched the dark shape close in with terrible, silent speed. 20 seconds. Brace for impact, the tactical officer shouted. The ship shuddered violently as the final pulse struck home, tearing through what remained of the weakened shields. The bridge went dark for a moment, emergency lights flickering to life a heartbeat later. Elena was thrown from her chair, catching herself against the console. Report, she shouted, pulling herself upright. Hull breach, decks 9 and 10, someone called. Emergency doors sealed automatically. No casualties reported, but we lost cargo bay too. Jump drive status. Reyes looked up, his face pale but determined. Charged, Captain, we can jump. Do it now. The helm officer slammed his hand down on the controls. For 1 terrifying second, nothing happened. And then the stars outside the viewport stretched into long streaks of light, and the Meridian vanished into hyperspace, leaving the 3 black ships behind in the empty dark. Silence fell across the bridge. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. They simply breathed, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. We made it, Reyes said finally, disbelief in his voice. Elena let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Casualty report, she said, forcing herself back into focus. 12 injured, none critical, came the reply. We were lucky, Captain. It wasn't luck, Elena said quietly. It was good people doing their jobs under pressure. She stood and walked toward the viewport, watching the streaks of hyperspace light race past. Somewhere behind them, in real space, 3 Skarn ships were likely searching for a target that was no longer there. But for how long would that be enough? The old Threnai leader's words echoed in her mind. They always find us. Reyes stepped up beside her. Captain, what now? We can't outrun them forever. Sooner or later they'll catch up. And when they do, we won't be the only ones in danger. Elena turned to look at him. You're thinking about Earth. I'm thinking about everyone, Reyes said. If the Skarn wiped out the entire council in 5 years, what happens when they find humanity? We don't even know what they truly are, or why they're doing this. Elena's jaw tightened. He was right to worry. But something else was forming in her mind, something the old Threnai leader had said, something she could not shake loose. The council is gone. Not weakened, not scattered. Gone. If that was true, then the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely. Humanity was no longer just a small, isolated species hiding in the corner of known space. They might be one of the last free civilizations left standing. "Get me the survivors' leader," Elena said. "I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." The old Threnai sat in the Meridian's small medical bay, wrapped in a warm blanket, sipping slowly from a cup of something warm the medics had made for him. His name, Elena had learned, was Threl Vantho, once a senior member of the Council's science division, now one of the last survivors of a fallen empire. "Captain Voss," he said as she entered, "you saved us. I do not have the words to thank you properly." "You can thank me by telling me everything you know," Elena said, sitting across from him. "About the Skarn, about what happened to the Council. Everything." Threl's golden eyes darkened with old pain. "It began 5 years ago," he said slowly. "A signal, deep in unexplored space, beyond even our farthest colonies. We thought it was a new species reaching out, hoping for contact, as new species often do." He paused, his hands trembling around the warm cup. "It was not a greeting," he continued. "It was the beginning of the end. Within months, 3 border worlds went silent. Then a dozen, then 100. Fleet after fleet was sent to investigate, and fleet after fleet never returned. By the time the Council understood the threat, it was already too late to stop it." "But why?" Elena asked. "What do they want?" Threl shook his head slowly. "We do not know. They do not communicate, they do not negotiate. They simply come, and everything they touch ends. Worlds go dark. Fleets vanish. It is as if they are erasing us from existence, one point of light at a time." Elena sat back, letting the weight of his words settle over her. An enemy that could destroy an entire galactic council in 5 years. An enemy with no clear motive, no communication, no mercy. "How many are left?" Elena asked quietly. "Of the council, of everyone." Threl's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Perhaps a few scattered survivors like us. Perhaps none at all. I do not know if we are the last, Captain Voss. I fear that we might be." The medical bay fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Elena thought of Earth, of home, of family, of every human who had built a life in the 200 years since the isolation, unaware that a storm like this existed in the wider galaxy. "They'll come for us eventually," Elena said, more to herself than to Threl. "Won't they?" Threl looked up at her, his golden eyes steady despite his fear. "Everyone falls before them eventually, Captain. Everyone but—" He paused, studying her carefully. "But what?" Elena asked. "But perhaps not everyone falls the same way," Threl said slowly. "Your people were left behind by the galaxy, Captain Voss. Forgotten, isolated, and yet here you are, strong, united, and willing to save even those who abandoned you. Perhaps that is something the Skarn have never faced before." Elena considered his words carefully. Humanity had grown alone, without help, without allies, without the comfort of a galactic community. They had learned to survive on their own terms, to build strength from isolation rather than dependence. Maybe, just maybe, that made them different. Her calm crackled to life suddenly, Reyes's voice sharp with urgency. "Captain, you need to see this. We're picking up new signals, dozens of them, scattered across multiple systems. It looks like survivors. More survivors, just like the Threnai ship. Emergency signals all across this region of space." Elena stood quickly. "How many systems?" There was a pause, heavy with meaning. "At least 12, Captain. Maybe more." Elena looked back at Threl, whose face had gone pale with realization. 12 systems. 12 desperate calls for help, echoing across the dark, unanswered for who knew how long. "Get me a full report," Elena said. "Every signal, every location. We're not just here to save one ship." She turned toward the door, her mind already racing ahead to the difficult choices that lay before them. Humanity, once judged too small and too young to matter, was about to become the last hope for a dying galaxy. And somewhere out in the endless dark, the Skarn were still hunting, patient, silent, and closer than anyone realized. The bridge of the meridian was quiet except for the soft beeping of the sensor array. Elena stood before the main display, watching as more and more red dots appeared across the star map. Each dot was a signal. Each signal was a call for help. Each call meant lives hanging in the balance somewhere out in the dark. 23 signals now, Reyes said, his voice tired. And they keep coming. Elena studied the map carefully. The signals were scattered across a wide region of space, some close together, some far apart. Different star systems, different species most likely. All of them crying out into the void, hoping someone, anyone, would hear them. This isn't just one ship in trouble, Elena said quietly. This is a whole region falling apart. Captain, said Dr. Chen, stepping forward with a datapad in her hand. I've been studying the patterns. The Skarn don't seem to move randomly. They're pushing through this sector like a wave, system by system. Whatever direction they're heading. She paused, hesitant to finish the thought. Say it, Elena said. They're heading toward the outer human colonies, Chen said finally. If this pattern continues, in less than 2 years, they'll reach the edge of our territory. The bridge went silent. 2 years. It sounded like a long time, but Elena knew better. 2 years was nothing when facing an enemy that had destroyed a galaxy-spanning council in 5. We need to warn Earth, Reyes said. Immediately. Full report. Everything we've learned. Agreed, Elena said. But we can't just run home and hide behind a warning. Not while there are people out there dying. She turned back to the star map. How many of these signals are still active? 18, said the sensor officer. 5 have already gone silent since we started tracking them. 18 more calls for help. 18 more chances to prove that humanity was different from the council that had abandoned them. Set a course for the nearest signal, Elena ordered. We'll gather as many survivors as we can, then head back to Earth with everything we've learned. The council fell because they fought alone, system by system, never working together until it was too late. We're not going to make that mistake. The next signal led them to a small, damaged transport ship, drifting near a dead star. Inside, they found survivors from a species called the Orin. Small, quick-moving beings with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes that seemed to hold endless sadness. There were only 40 of them left, crammed into a ship built for 20. They came from nowhere, one of the Orin elders told Elena through a translator device. One day the sky was full of light. The next day, it was empty. Our home, gone. Just gone. Elena helped load the survivors onto the Meridian, now becoming crowded with refugees from different worlds, different species, all bound together by the same terrible experience. As the numbers grew, so did the tension. Space was limited, supplies were limited, and the shadow of the Skarn never felt far behind. Captain, we're running low on food rations, said the ship's quartermaster during one of their brief stops between signals. At this rate, we'll need to resupply within the week. Understood, Elena said. Reyes, plot a course that takes us near one of our outer supply depots. We'll restock and continue the rescue effort from there. But even as she gave the order, Elena felt the weight of an impossible math problem pressing down on her. Every signal they answered brought them more survivors, but also more risk, more exposure, more time spent in dangerous territory. And somewhere, always somewhere, the Skarn were moving closer. It was during their 6th rescue, at a research outpost belonging to a species called the Vesserai, that things went terribly wrong. The outpost was small, built into the side of an asteroid, home to a community of scientists who had been studying ancient ruins in the area. When the Meridian arrived, the outpost's few remaining survivors were desperate, having survived 3 separate Skarn scouting attacks in the past month alone. They're not attacking in full force yet, explained Vesserai's lead scientist, a tall being named Doran Kael, as the boarding team moved through the outpost gathering survivors and equipment. I believe these are exploration groups, testing our defenses, learning our weaknesses before the main force arrives. How do you know this? Elena asked, helping carry a crate of research data toward the shuttle. Because I have studied them, Doran said grimly. Longer than anyone else alive, perhaps. This outpost was originally built to study ancient ruins left behind by a civilization even older than the Council. Ruins that speak of the Skarn, Captain Voss. Ruins that are thousands of years old. Elena stopped, staring at him. The Skarn have done this before? Doran nodded slowly. This is not their first hunt, Captain. According to the ruins, this pattern has repeated many times throughout galactic history. A great civilization rises, grows powerful, and then the Skarn come. No one knows why. No one knows where they originate. They arrive, they erase, and then they vanish for centuries, sometimes millennia, before returning again. Like a cycle, Elena murmured. Precisely, Doran said. The ruins suggest that no civilization has ever survived a Skarn hunt by fighting them directly, only by hiding, or by finding some way to make themselves uninteresting. Elena's mind raced. If Doran was right, if the Skarn operated on some ancient, repeating cycle of destruction, then perhaps there was hope in understanding their patterns. Perhaps there was a way to prepare, to defend, to survive where others had failed. I need to see those research files, Elena said. Everything you have, everything you... Of course, Doran said. But Captain, we must hurry. My scanners detected a Skarn probe just hours before you arrived. If they've found us... The outpost shuddered violently, cutting off his words. Alarms began to blare through the corridors. They're here, someone shouted from down the hall. Skarn ships just entered the system. Elena's heart sank. How many? Only one this time, came the reply. But Captain, it's massive. Far bigger than the scout ships we encountered before. Everyone to the shuttle now, Elena ordered, grabbing as much of Doran's research data as she could carry. We don't have time to argue. The evacuation became chaos. Survivors already weak and frightened stumbled through the shaking corridors as the outpost began to crumble around them. Elena helped an elderly Vesserai scientist to his feet, guiding him toward the exit as debris fell from the ceiling above. The research, Doran shouted, struggling against the crowd to reach a locked storage room. I can't leave it behind. It's the only proof of what they are, the only clue to stopping them. Doran, there's no time, Elena called after him, but he was already gone, disappearing down a side corridor toward the storage room. Elena cursed under her breath and turned to Reyes, who had just arrived with a security team. Get everyone else to the shuttle, I'm going after him. Captain, that's too dangerous. That's an order, Reyes, Elena snapped. Go. She sprinted down the corridor after Doran, the outpost shaking violently around her with each passing second. She found him struggling with a jammed door, his hands trembling as he tried to force it open. Move aside, Elena said, pulling a small device from her belt. She placed it against the lock and triggered a quick override sequence. The door hissed open. Inside, rows of data drives lined the walls, each one containing decades of research on the ancient ruins and the mysterious cycle of the Skarn. Grab what you can carry, Elena said. We don't have much time. They worked quickly, filling a small case with as many data drives as possible. The outpost shuddered again, more violently this time, throwing them both against the wall. That was close, Doran gasped, pulling himself upright. Too close, Elena said. We need to move now. They ran back through the crumbling corridors, dodging falling debris and sparking wires. Elena's comm crackled urgently in her ear. Captain, the Skarn ship is powering some kind of weapon. Reyes's voice was tight with fear. Sensors are picking up a massive energy buildup. We're almost there, Elena shouted back, pushing Doran ahead of her toward the docking bay. They burst through the final corridor just as the shuttle's engines roared to life, ramp already beginning to close. Elena shoved Doran forward, and strong hands pulled him aboard. She leaped the last few feet, catching the edge of the ramp as it sealed shut behind her. Go, 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 she shouted. The shuttle rocketed away from the crumbling outpost, engines straining as it raced back toward the meridian. Through the small window, Elena watched as a massive beam of dark energy tore through the outpost behind them, reducing decades of research and history into scattered debris within seconds. They had made it. Barely. Back aboard the Meridian, Elena sat in the small conference room, surrounded by the data drives they had rescued from the outpost. Doran Cale sat across from her, still shaken from their narrow escape but determined to continue his work. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For risking your life for research that means nothing to your own people." "It means everything," Elena said. "If understanding the Skarn gives us even a small chance of protecting Earth, then it was worth the risk." Doran nodded, beginning to sort through the rescued data drives. "Give me time, Captain, and I may be able to find patterns, weaknesses perhaps, or clues about their true nature. The ruins spoke of previous cycles, previous civilizations that faced this threat. If any of them found a way to survive, even partially, the answer may be hidden somewhere in this data." Elena watched him work for a moment before standing and walking toward the observation window. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly in every direction, far more space than humanity had ever truly explored, hidden behind 2 centuries of isolation. Somewhere out there, more signals were surely calling, more survivors waiting, more pieces of a dying galaxy hoping for rescue. Her comm buzzed softly. It was Reyes. "Captain, we've received a priority message from Earth Command," he said. "They've heard about our rescue operations. Command wants a full report, and they want you back at Earth as soon as possible." Elena sighed quietly. She had known this moment would come eventually. "Understood. Set a course for Earth. We'll bring the survivors and everything we've learned." "Captain," Reyes added, his voice hesitant. "Command also mentioned, there's been debate. Some officials are questioning whether continuing these rescue missions is wise. They're worried about drawing Skarn attention toward Earth." Elena's jaw tightened. She had expected resistance, but hearing it stated so plainly still stung. "And what do you think, Reyes?" There was a pause on the line. I've seen those children, Captain. The Threnai, the Orin, all of them. I've seen how scared they are, and I've seen how grateful they are that someone finally came for them. I don't know if it's the right strategic choice, but I know it's the right thing to do." Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. "Then let's go make our case to Command together." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, the survivors from different worlds slowly began to form fragile connections aboard the crowded ship. Threnai children played quiet games with Orin younglings. Vesserai scientists shared meals with human crew members, exchanging stories of their vastly different worlds. Slowly, carefully, something unexpected began to grow among the frightened refugees. Hope. Elena spent much of the journey reviewing Doran's early research findings, learning as much as she could about the ancient cycle of destruction that had apparently repeated throughout galactic history. The data was incomplete, filled with gaps and mysteries, but one thing became increasingly clear. No civilization had ever successfully fought back against the Skarn through force alone. "Perhaps that's the mistake everyone has made," Doran suggested during one of their late-night research sessions. "Every fallen civilization tried to face the Skarn as they had faced every other enemy, through strength, through weapons, through dominance. But the ruins suggest something different might be needed." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "The ruins mention something called the Gathering," Doran explained, pulling up an ancient text translated from the ruin carvings. "A theory, perhaps only a legend, that suggests the only civilizations who ever slowed the Skarn's advance were those who united many different species together, combining their strengths rather than standing alone." Elena considered this carefully. It made a strange kind of sense. The Council had fallen because they fought as scattered, isolated worlds, each too proud or too suspicious to fully trust the others. Perhaps unity, not strength alone, was the missing piece. "If that's true," Elena said slowly, "then what we've been doing these past few weeks, rescuing survivors, bringing different species together, might be more important than we realized." Doran nodded. "It may be humanity's greatest strength, Captain. You were isolated long enough to understand what it means to be truly alone. Perhaps that is exactly why you are the ones capable of bringing everyone else together. As the meridian approached the outer edges of human space, Elena stood once more at the observation window, watching as the familiar stars of home came slowly into view. Behind her, on decks now filled with survivors from a dozen different worlds, laughter mixed quietly with grief, hope mixed with fear. Humanity had been left behind by the galaxy once, cast aside and forgotten by those who feared what they might become. Now that same galaxy, broken, desperate, and dying, was turning to humanity as its very last hope. Elena's comm buzzed one final time as Earth's orbital defense grid came into view ahead. "Captain," Reyes said quietly, "welcome home." Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself for whatever difficult conversations awaited them on Earth. The fight for the galaxy's survival was only just beginning, and humanity's choice, whether to stand together with those who once abandoned them, would soon be tested in ways none of them could yet imagine. Behind the meridian, hidden in the vast darkness of space, something else was moving, silent, patient, watching. The Skarn had noticed humanity at last. Earth looked exactly as Elena remembered it: blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting slowly across the surface. From orbit it seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos happening in the wider galaxy. But Elena knew that peace would not last much longer. The meridian docked at Earth's largest orbital station, and within hours, Elena found herself standing before the full Earth Defense Council, 12 men and women who controlled the planet's military and political decisions. They sat behind a long table, their faces serious, their eyes fixed on Elena as she finished her report. "So," said Admiral Voss, no relation to Elena, though the name always drew a second glance, "you're telling us that an unknown enemy destroyed an entire galactic civilization in 5 years, and now you want us to get involved." "I'm telling you they're already involved, Admiral," Elena replied firmly. "Whether we choose to act or not, the Skarn are moving through this sector. Doran Kale's research suggests we have less than 2 years before they reach our outer colonies." Murmurs spread across the table. One councilwoman, Director Amina Osei, leaned forward. "Captain Voss, I understand your compassion. Truly I do. But we spent 200 years building this civilization alone, without help from anyone. Why should we risk everything we've built to save the very species who abandoned us?" Elena had expected this question. She had turned it over in her own mind, more times than she could count. "Because 200 years ago we needed help, and no one came," she said. "That doesn't mean we should become the same kind of people who turned away. Sentiment doesn't win wars, Captain," Admiral Voss said sharply. "No," Elena agreed. "But isolation didn't save the Council either. They stood apart from each other, each civilization protecting only itself. That's exactly why they fell so quickly. If we make the same mistake, we'll share their fate." Silence settled over the room. Elena pressed forward, laying out Doran's research on the table. The ancient ruins, the ideas about the gathering, the theory that unity might be humanity's only real chance at survival. "I'm not asking you to fight the Skarn alone," Elena said. "I'm asking you to consider a different approach. Bring the surviving species together. Combine our knowledge, our resources, our strength. If there's truly no way to defeat the Skarn through force alone, then perhaps our best chance is doing something no one else has ever tried." Director Osei studied the research data carefully, her expression slowly shifting from doubt to something closer to consideration. "And if you're wrong, Captain, if this gathering theory turns out to be nothing more than an old legend, then at least we'll have tried something different," Elena said. "Something better than simply waiting to be erased." The council debated late into the night. Elena waited outside the chamber, exhausted but unwilling to leave until she had an answer. Rhea sat beside her, equally tired, equally uncertain about what the future held. "Do you think they'll agree?" Reyes asked quietly. "I don't know," Elena admitted, "but we didn't come this far to give up now." 3 days later, the council reached its decision. Earth would take a bold step, reaching out to any surviving species scattered across the region, inviting them to a new kind of alliance. Not a council built on judgment and exclusion, like the one that had failed before, but something different. Something equal. They called it the Unity Accord. Word spread quickly across the survivors already living aboard human ships and stations. Threl Vantho, the old Threnai leader Elena had rescued in Part 1, stood before a gathering of representatives from a dozen different species, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. For centuries, my people believed strength meant standing above others, he said. We built an empire based on judgment, deciding who was worthy and who was not. That empire is gone now, destroyed by an enemy we never understood. Perhaps it is time we tried something different. Slowly, cautiously, other species began to agree. The Orin, the Vesserai, and several smaller groups Elena's team had rescued during their journey all pledged their support to the new alliance. It was small, fragile, and untested, but it was a beginning. Meanwhile, Doran Kale worked tirelessly alongside human scientists, studying every scrap of data recovered from the outpost and cross-referencing it with information gathered from other survivors. Slowly, a clearer picture of the Skarn began to emerge. They're not like us, Doran explained during a briefing with Elena and the newly formed Alliance Council. They don't seem to communicate in any language we understand. Their ships show no signs of individual crew. We believe they may be partially or fully automated, controlled by some kind of central intelligence. A hive mind? Elena asked. Possibly, Doran said. Or something even stranger. What we do know is that they target civilizations based on some kind of measurement, likely technological growth or expansion. The more a species grows, the more attention they draw. So the safest thing to do would be to stay small, muttered one of the Vesserai scientists. Stay hidden. Perhaps, Doran said, but hiding didn't save the council. Hiding never works forever. Eventually they find everyone. Elena studied the data carefully. Then we need another approach. If they measure growth, perhaps we can hide our true strength while still preparing our defenses. Strike quickly, quietly, and only when necessary. A guerrilla strategy, Reyes said, nodding slowly. Using unity and knowledge instead of raw power. Exactly, Elena said. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy, we never have been. But we've survived plenty of hardships by being clever, adaptable, and stubborn. Maybe that's exactly the advantage we need. Over the following months, the Unity Accord grew stronger. Human engineers worked alongside Threnai scientists, combining centuries of alien technology with humanity's practical, battle-tested designs. New ships were built, faster, stealthier, designed specifically to avoid detection rather than engage in open combat. Elena oversaw much of this effort personally, traveling between newly established colonies and gathering points where survivors from different worlds continued to arrive, drawn by rumors of a growing alliance willing to offer refuge and hope. It was during one such visit at a newly established outpost near the edge of human territory that the first true test of their strategy arrived. Captain, we're detecting Skarn signatures, came the urgent call from the outpost's sensor room. A single scout ship, similar to the ones you encountered before. It's heading directly toward the colony. Elena's stomach tightened. This was exactly the scenario they had been preparing for. Activate the stealth protocols, she ordered. Full power down on all non-essential systems. Minimal energy signature. The colony went dark, lights dimming, engines powering down to the lowest possible levels. Elena watched anxiously from the command center as the Skarn scout ship drew closer on the sensor display, its strange, jagged shape unmistakable even at a distance. It's scanning the system, Doran said quietly, studying the sensor readings. If our stealth measures work, it shouldn't detect any significant activity here. Long, tense minutes passed. The Skarn ship drifted closer, its scans sweeping slowly across the outpost and surrounding space. Elena held her breath, watching every flicker of the sensor display, praying their preparations were enough. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Skarn ship altered course, moving away from the colony and disappearing back into the depths of space. A collective breath of relief spread through the command center. It's leaving, the sensor officer confirmed. No indication it detected us. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. Their strategy had worked, at least this once. It was a small victory, but an important one. Proof that hiding intelligently rather than simply running blindly could offer at least temporary safety. This won't work forever, Doran cautioned. Eventually, as our alliance grows, so will our energy signatures. We can only hide for so long. I know, Elena said, but every day we survive is another day to prepare to grow stronger to bring more survivors into the fold. We're not looking for a permanent solution yet, Doran. We're looking for time. Months turned into a year. The Unity Accord continued to grow, slowly but steadily, as word spread of humanity's willingness to help any survivors willing to work together. More species joined, bringing with them fragments of knowledge, technology, and history that helped paint an increasingly detailed picture of the Skarn threat. Threl Vantho became an important bridge between human leadership and the Alliance's alien members, his wisdom and experience helping smooth tensions that occasionally arose between species with very different customs and priorities. You know, Threl said to Elena one evening, as they stood together aboard the newly constructed Alliance headquarters, a massive station built jointly by human and Threnai engineers. My people once believed ourselves the wisest in the galaxy. We judged your species, found you lacking, and cast you aside without a second thought. That's in the past now, Elena said. Perhaps, Threl said, but I think of it often. If we had been wiser then, perhaps the Council would still stand today. Perhaps millions of lives would have been saved, had we simply extended a hand instead of turning our backs. Elena considered his words carefully. Maybe that's exactly why this alliance is different, Threl. We're not repeating the same mistakes. We're learning from them. Threl nodded slowly, a small, tired smile crossing his silver face. Your species has an old saying, I believe. Something about turning weakness into strength. Something like that, Elena said, smiling faintly. As their conversation continued, an urgent alert interrupted them. Elena's comm buzzed sharply, Reyes's voice tense with alarm. Captain, we have a problem. Long-range sensors just picked up a massive Skarn fleet movement. Not scouts this time. A full invasion force, heading directly toward the Alliance's main settlement cluster. Elena's heart sank. This was the moment they had feared. The moment their careful preparations would finally be tested against overwhelming force. How long until they arrive? She asked. 18 hours, Captain. Maybe less. Elena turned to Threl, his expression mirroring the same grim determination she felt rising within herself. It's time, she said quietly. Time for what? Threl asked. Time to prove that unity is stronger than isolation, Elena said. Gather the Alliance Council, we need to act now. 18 hours later, as the massive Skarn fleet approached the Alliance's primary settlement cluster, they found something unexpected waiting for them. Instead of a single, poorly defended colony, they encountered a coordinated defense unlike anything the Skarn had faced in centuries. Human ships, equipped with stealth technology developed alongside Threnai engineers, waited silently in the shadows of nearby asteroid fields. Vesserai sensor arrays, hidden throughout the system, tracked every movement of the approaching fleet with pinpoint accuracy. Oran pilots, known for their incredible reflexes, manned small, agile fighter craft designed specifically to exploit weaknesses discovered in previous encounters with Skarn vessels. All positions hold steady. Elena's voice echoed across the Alliance's combined comm channels. Wait for my signal. The Skarn fleet moved cautiously into the system, their sensors sweeping the area, searching for signs of resistance. For a long, tense moment, it seemed as though the Alliance's hidden defenses might go completely undetected. Then the lead Skarn vessel paused, its scans locking onto something. Likely the faint energy signature of the main settlement itself, impossible to fully hide given its size and population. They've found the colony, Reyes reported grimly, moving into attack position. Now, Elena ordered. The Alliance's hidden fleet sprang into action, breaking cover simultaneously from multiple directions. Human ships targeted the Skarn fleet's flanks, drawing their attention away from the settlement. Oran fighters darted between the massive enemy vessels, striking weak points identified through months of careful study. Vesserai sensor data guided every attack with deadly precision, exploiting every weakness the Alliance had painstakingly uncovered. The Skarn fleet, caught completely off guard by the coordinated assault, struggled to respond effectively. Their strange, hive-like coordination, usually a strength, became a weakness against an enemy attacking from multiple directions with unpredictable tactics. "Their formation is breaking," Reyes called out excitedly. "The strategy is working." Elena watched intently from the Meridian's bridge, coordinating the battle alongside representatives from every species within the Alliance. It was chaotic, dangerous, and far from a guaranteed victory, but for the first time, the enemy that had destroyed an entire galactic civilization was being pushed back. The battle raged for hours, ships from a dozen different worlds fighting side by side against a common threat. Losses were heavy on both sides, but slowly, steadily, the Alliance's combined strategy began to overwhelm the Skarn fleet's usual advantages. Finally, as the remaining Skarn vessels retreated back into deep space, a stunned silence fell across the Alliance's command channels. "They're leaving," Reyes said, disbelief evident in his voice. "Captain, we actually did it. We held them back." Elena allowed herself a moment to breathe, relief flooding through her exhausted body. It wasn't a complete victory. The Skarn would undoubtedly return, likely with greater numbers and better preparation. But for the first time since this terrible war began, hope felt like more than just a distant dream. "Send word to every settlement, every ship, every survivor within the Alliance," Elena said quietly. "Tell them what happened here today. Tell them that unity works. Tell them that we can fight back." In the months that followed, news of the Alliance's victory spread rapidly throughout the region, drawing even more survivors and previously isolated species into the growing coalition. Earth, once judged unworthy and cast aside by the very civilization now desperately seeking its help, had become the heart of a new kind of galactic community, one built not on judgment and exclusion, but on unity, cooperation, and mutual respect. Elena stood once more before the Earth Defense Council, though the mood in the room had shifted dramatically from her first difficult meeting months earlier. "The Unity Accord continues to grow," she reported. "More species join every week, drawn by our success against the Skarn and our commitment to genuine equality among all member worlds." Director Osei, who had once questioned Elena's compassion so sharply, now nodded with evident pride. "You were right, Captain Voss. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together." Elena smiled tiredly, thinking back to that broken Threnai cruiser drifting silently in the darkness of space, where this entire journey had begun. Humanity had been left behind by the galaxy once, forgotten and dismissed by those too afraid to see their true potential. But when the moment came, when an ancient, uncaring enemy threatened to erase an entire galaxy from existence, humanity had made a different choice. They chose compassion over resentment. They chose unity over isolation. They chose to stand with those who had once abandoned them, proving that true strength lies not in judgment or division, but in the courage to help others, even when they never helped you first. The war against the Skarn was far from over. Difficult battles, heavy losses, and uncertain challenges still waited ahead. But for the first time in a long, long while, the scattered survivors of a dying galaxy had found something precious and rare. Hope, built upon the unshakable foundation of unity. And at the very heart of that hope stood humanity, once left behind by the galaxy, now leading it toward an uncertain, but far brighter, future. The end.